Hi, I'm Ollie. I'm learning Godot by making a farm game about finding animals. The idea for making this game came from the podcast Distinguished Humans, and they were talking about this idea as they were introducing the idea for a weekly game dev challenge, and they thought that this could be one of the challenges they could make. And I just ran with that idea and thought I'd go for it. To start, let's look at character movement. So, I don't know too much about this, but as far as I can tell, in Godot you'd usually make a player character using the character body 3D node or the rigid body 3D node. And both of these are physics bodies that also fall under the collision object 3D in Godot. Now I decided to use the character body 3D to see if I can get a player working. So let's see how that went. So to start with, I thought I'd need the player. So I made this little scene with a player, and it pretty much just has a little capsule bean, and then this is essentially the standard script you get with the character controller 3D, and it pretty much gets what I want after adding a little camera. I mostly understand what's here, and I thought I'd add in this little bit to try and make it so the little character faces the way you're moving, and it just doesn't work. It kind of all messes up. But that's because hold on, wait a second. This bit of code that I tried to add really does show that I have no idea what I'm doing and that I am really learning. But this lookat function, although it can be used in 2D, I don't think it's doing it at all what I thought it would do in this case. So I found two tutorials, one by Lucky, which I watched just to get a feel for the actual character 3D node, and this other one by GDQuest, which is exactly what I was looking for. So I watched both of these, tried to learn what I could, and then I thought I'd try and implement something very similar to the GDQuest 3D character movement. So I deleted what I had and thought I'd try again and see what I could learn from these. So, what I can tell after watching these videos is that there's a few stages we can think of individually to get the movement we want. The movement, character rotation, and jumping. You can also have camera rotation, but I don't need that for this game. But anyway, the character movement. In a first-person game, the template script for a character body 3D would be a great start. Usually, our forward input would correspond to the forward-facing direction of our character, and as they rotate, our input axis will correspond to the character's local axis. For a third-person game, it's a bit different. As I'd like a fixed camera in our game, we could have the input direction move the character along the global X and Z axes. But if we later decide we'd like to rotate the camera, this breaks and the controls will feel off. So a good approach is to get the camera's axis and base our X and Z move direction from that, like they do in the GDQuest video. So, in code, we'd need to get the player's input and store that in a variable, and also get the camera's axis and store the forward direction and the right direction, using the camera.globalBasis.z or .x returns a vector of 3 for each respective axis. To get the character's move direction, we combine these like this. And in this code, our forward and right axis variables have a vector 3 direction with a length of 1, and our input will be on a scale of 0 to 1, so this will output 0 when nothing is pressed, or the camera-based direction when the key is pressed. I don't know if I explained that well, but as a newbie it took me quite a bit to understand what's actually happening here. But anyway, then we just need to set the move direction's y-axis to 0 so the character isn't moving up and down, then normalize this vector. Then we just need to apply this to the velocity by multiplying our movement direction by the movement speed. And you can use the move towards function to accelerate this by a factor of the acceleration variable times by delta. and then you can just call the move and slide function. And if we play this, this is what happens. Rotation. I'd like it so the character turns to face the move direction, and then stays facing the last move direction when you stop moving. For this, we need another variable, which we'll call last move direction. To actually store this direction, it's a lot simpler than I thought it would be. We can just use an if statement to check if the move direction vector has a length greater than something small, like 0.1, we then store the move direction. So once the player stops input, the last move direction value is not changed, essentially storing the direction we want. From this, you can then calculate a target angle, and I don't even want to pretend to understand how this works, but that is how you do it. And then once you've got the target angle, you can just set your character's rotation to the angle. And you can even use a lerp angle function to accelerate the rotation by a rotation speed to the target angle. Jumping. All we need for this is a gravity variable and a jump impulse variable. We can then check for player input and check if the player is on the floor. If both of these are true, we add the jump impulse to the velocity. And then all we need to do is apply the gravity force to our velocity by adding it every frame. I already feel like I'm not really learning what I'm doing. I feel like I'm just copying what they're writing on the tutorials. So I've kind of went back a step and I'm trying to rewrite this movement script. This may not be the most productive thing to know, but I think, you know, for me to learn how to do this, I've got, you know, I feel like I need to know which bit's doing. So I've just rewritten the code and I've just put these comments, which are like the individual steps that I know how to do it, and then I've got to figure out the code. I've got the input bit, but then when you get to the camera direction, I don't really understand what's going on. But I'm just doing it again to try and solidify that, and then I'll move on to the next bit. So here's what I've got, and I'm so glad I did this, because now there's bits in here I fiddled with and I understand. So obviously the input, that's fairly straightforward, I think. You can get the hang of that. And then this, I mean, this is all just to get the camera's perspective, and then you know, just essentially get the vector of where forward and right is. I do kind of understand that now. But this is the bit I didn't understand, because if we go to the one I created before, you had this section here where you get the move direction, and you've got to like store the vertical velocity first, then reset it, then apply the move direction, and then reapply the vertical velocity that was from earlier. And that's so when you're jumping, because if I go back to mine, because I first done this and I thought, why can't I just apply the velocity? Which is what I did. I pretty much, if I just comment out this one, get rid of these, this is essentially what I thought you could do. Just apply the whole thing. But if we show you what happens here, but yeah, you see, like it doesn't store the velocity, so it's just applying gravity to 0 every frame, and you just float down, and then you get that stop at the top. So it's essentially applying 0 every frame to the velocity, instead of having that acceleration add in gravity, so it gets bigger every time. So that's what I thought. I thought instead of doing the weird store velocity thing, I could just not use this this axis when calculating the velocity with the input. So I literally just separate it out, so the x affects the x and the z affects the z, and then the y just comes from the jump and the gravity. And I thought that was much simpler. I don't know if there's going to be any bugs with this. I can always revert back to the other way, but in my mind this works a lot, you know, it just seems simpler. And lastly, before I move on, I wanted to add this Godot character to the scene and hook up some animations. Now all I did is add this asset to the scene and then add a bit of code to hook up some animations, and this just runs some of the functions that are supplied with the character. I had a look at the character's code, and this is beyond me at the moment, but it was quite fun, at least getting something to look quite good. But when I added this to the scene, it just kept walking backwards. But that was a quick fix just by adding a negative sign to my movement. I don't know if this was an error on my side or if it's just a quirk. But there we have it for this video. I'm going to be continuing this game, adding interactions, and then hopefully trying to make it look good at some point. But thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll see you next time.